This segment brought to you by BetterHelp. All right, what would you do if you had an extra hour in your day? I know a lot of us out there where we just think we're too cramped, we got too much information, we got too much stuff going on, we don't have enough time to get everything done that we want to get done. Well, that means you got to prioritize because you're not picking up that extra hour. You got to make that 24 hours work for you. So what do? Well, again, you prioritize, you set boundaries, you do all those things. And you know what's hard to do is find a way to do that and still maintain relationships. Well, therapy is going to help you out there. And if you haven't heard of BetterHelp, I want you to give it a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. All you have to do is go to betterhelp.com/zone, fill out a brief questionnaire, and then they're going to match you with a therapist. The great thing about, and again, these are all licensed, certified therapists. And you can switch those therapists at any time for no additional charge. But I want you to take advantage of this and give it a shot. That's right. It's learned for you to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/zone today, and you're going to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/zone. Get that 10% off. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/zone. Yeah. We'll go local. We'll go BYU and Utah State. Yeah, we'll start with BYU and then go Utah State.
And Nate, we'll kind of stay in those conferences first. So we'll go BYU and Utah State, and then we'll kind of move into the conference a little bit. So Big 12 and Mountain West Conference. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Iowa State. Okay. You got some one-seeder video too, like when we get into one seeds? You're pulling it up too?
Yeah. Just FYI, the audio is going over the stream right now.
What we're saying?
Keep it clean.
We always do here on the Hans Scotty Show.
Yes, we do.
You're talking about 1.5 Eagle Scouts here. Oh, wait. Maybe
zero.
Oh, okay. So 0, half, 1. So 1.5 out of 3.
50%.
You're Eagle, aren't you, Scotty?
Yeah.
What'd you do for your Eagle project?
I installed welded some pig pens at the Cassia County Fairgrounds in Burley, Idaho.
See, this is the kind of wholesome information you get during the breaks in our stream.
Yep. Oh, crap. That is going across the street. You set me up.
He's a pork grate welder. That's fun. That's fantastic. Nothing to be ashamed of.
That's a lot of work, man. Hans and Scotty, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Hanging out here at JCW's. That's right. Grab yourself the burger, grab yourself the fries, the shakes, everything, and let's talk some NCAA tournament bracket as Ken Pomroy is hanging out with us. Ken, how are you?
Doing great, guys. Always great to check in with you. Kind of a rare treat here to have you here, Scotty. It's been
I know, right?
Since we've done it.
Thankfully, we got that Friday game, so I don't leave until tomorrow. So So yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to break down. But what's this? What's this been like for you over the last week or so? Been busy, or is it just this thing kind of runs itself?
Well, it runs itself a little bit, but it's certainly been busy as well. I mean, this week is the peak of my existence and my popularity for whatever it's worth. And by the time Thursday rolls around, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to talk to me. So
I got to admit, though, and Scotty, you've probably seen the same. This has been the year of Ken Pomroy. Like this, for one reason or the other, your name has been involved in a lot of different decisions and interest points and all the rankings. And has it been typically loud and noisy for you this year? Untypically noisy and loud?
yeah, it has. I don't know what to attribute that to, but yeah, there's no question. I hear my name on TV a little bit more, or I hear secondhand from people who hear my name on TV. So nothing wrong with a little free advertising.
Yeah, no, you're getting that in spades for sure right now. And you know, people that think that you hate their school too.
Absolutely, yeah. There's always 2 or 3 special fan bases every year that think I hate their school or think I changed the ratings formula to hate their school. It's it's always an interesting phenomenon.
It's got to be kind of nice, though, because you rest in all fact driven. It's not like you're sitting there at the end of the thinking about your opinion like, maybe I came too hard on that opinion. Like everything that you do is fact driven, and you can say, hey, if you got a problem with it, let me show you the math.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the ratings are all automated. It is funny. You'll see every year a group of people will look at the ratings and they'll say, Ken Palm's broken this year. Something's wrong with it. And it's like, I really don't change the formula from year to year. So to whatever extent it's broken, the sport itself is broken. It's nothing I'm doing to it.
Well, and it's interesting too, because there's a lot of people that, and I feel like, okay, I'm just going to take a step back. I feel somewhat responsible for a little bit because I sent out a tweet and it was just an observation about how sometimes I'm just like, okay, I'm not sure how it works either, because Utah State had beat New Mexico in a big game up in Logan and yet dropped 3 spots in the rankings, and New Mexico went up. But you also have to take into consideration based on your projection of how that game was going to go, where you predicted Utah State was going to win.
Right.
And so
they have to hit a certain
and
number.
They have to hit that certain number, and so that's what kind of plays into it. And I think a lot of people are like, how is this even possible? And it's like, okay, on paper, you may think like, okay, well, that may not make a lot of sense. But in reality, with the algorithms and the numbers and everything you put in there, it does make sense.
Right. It's a different system in that it's making predictions. That's the entire purpose of it. So sometimes, you'll have a situation where a team beats a highly ranked team at home by a couple of points and they don't move, and people get upset by that because they're used to the AP poll or some other ranking system that solely values wins, moving a team up in that case. But in my case, if you're favored to beat a team at home by 2 and you beat them by 2, the computer's like, hey, there's no reason to change these rankings. Like, that's, the team did exactly what was expected. So yeah, that goes into it. So teams aren't rewarded necessarily for pure wins and losses. They're rewarded for points per possession, adjusted for who they play and where the game is played. And so sometimes that can lead to some counterintuitive results.
Well, let's start with BYU, because it feels like BYU has been a Ken Palm darling through a lot of the season in the rankings. Kind of walk us through where BYU started, where they ended, and why they kind of reigned supreme through the Ken Palm rankings.
Right. So, I mean, before they started, I had them 6.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, coming off a losing season on the WCC, but they brought back everybody. There was, scoring margin numbers in the WCC last year were a lot better than the record. Like it actually, they had at least as long as my data goes back 6 years. So they're turning just about everybody. And so there was some reason for that. I think you saw from so that's where they started, and they rocketed up the rankings pretty quick. They started off the season pretty hot. Big San Diego State, and they've really been in the top 20 since.
When you look at that matchup against Duquesne, What really jumps out at you, and what?
I would say BYU was done a huge favor by being given that opponent.
By the way, I love that.
Yeah. Right. So Duquesne as an 11 seed is really a historically weak 11. I mean, they're weaker than some 12s and 13s in this bracket. So I know BYU got moved down a seed line to make the bracket work for them and the schedule work for them. They deserved a 5. They got a 6, but they were done a huge favor in terms of who their opponent was. Duquesne really has, one of the poorer offenses in the entire tournament, and that's really where they struggle. They're a heavy defensive team, ranked 28th defensively, but 166 on offense is basically an average Division I offense. And so for BYU to draw that is a pretty nice luxury in the first round of the tournament. It's not, it's not a guaranteed win, but it's about as cushy of a draw as you can get for a 6 seed.
What do you think about teams that are making kind of their inaugural appearance since the expansion? Because Duquesne, again, this is their first showing since 1977. They haven't even seen a field this deep.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's crazy,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Scotty and I were looking.
Oh yeah,
because I'd heard it, but then we double checked it, and I'm like, geez, this is a team that's never made it to the tournament. So, so I know that Ken Palm rankings don't take these two things into consideration, but a coach that's saying he's going to retire after the season, and a team that's never been here to the expanded field. Like, how do you even draw something up for a team like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The past history means a lot there. It's ultimately going to be it's only going to be decided by how good the players are and how well they play. But credit to Keith Dambrot, their head coach. I believe LeBron James High School coach. Is that
that's right.
Yeah. So he's had quite a career, and good on him for being able to retire on a high note. I had the privilege. I met him a few years ago, but I saw him in the off season, and he's just a super nice guy. And so it's good to see him be able to go out here and get a tournament bid for a team, as you said, that has enjoyed hardly any tournament success.
They do shoot, just looking at your numbers, and you look at BYU, the 3-point attempt for field goal attempt, they're number 2 in the country. The old live and die by the 3, and sometimes that can lead to a good run in the tournament. Sometimes that leads to an early out if those shots aren't falling. Yeah,
the rare team that took more 3s than 2s this year, didn't shoot it particularly well, right around maybe slightly above the national average at 34.8%. And even worse than that in Big 12 play. So, they did struggle a bit to make shots in the Big 12. But, the good news is they're a solid offensive team, so they do get some of those misses back. And, I think the profile is great for BYU. I think that's how you have to build a team at BYU. Get great shooters. They have, pretty good size and good shooters. They can space the floor really well. And they're going to be a challenging team for, any opponent in this field to defend. As you mentioned, shots do have to go in. But if they do, they have the power to.
Can we peek ahead a little bit? What do you think of that matchup with Illinois?
Yeah, that's going to be a great matchup. I mean, Illinois is a team that doesn't play much defense.
Yeah,
they're involved in high scoring games left and right. Kind of suits BYU, I think, pretty well. They'll put some points on the scoreboard. Be a matter of if they can defend Terrence Shannon and Coleman Hawkins. They're Illinois' 2 high-scoring players. Can they contain that offense just enough? Because it's probably a game that's going to be played, in the 80s. It'll definitely be an entertaining affair, whether you're a BYU fan or not.
I would definitely say, for all you degenerates out there, take the over on that one.
On BYU, Illinois.
BYU, Illinois.
I don't know if there are any studies out there, or maybe you might know it off the top of your head, but historically, 3-point shooting teams, as they go into tournament play, do we see an increase in percentages made or a decrease in percentages made when the big show, the big dance is on?
Especially when you're playing in some of these like hockey NBA arenas, and then when you get into the football stadiums, when you got the backgrounds that are way in the back, and there's some adjustment there.
Because BYU's headed into Omaha, Nebraska. It's Omaha,
Nebraska. Yeah.
Headed into Omaha, Nebraska, the Health Center.
Right. That's a more traditional basketball venue. When you go to a dome, we do see an effect of maybe 1 or 2%. It's not huge, but The shooting is more difficult without the natural shooting background. The last couple of years, the issue has been that the NCAA uses a ball that is not used really by any actual team. So everybody's unfamiliar with the feel of the ball, and we've seen shooting percentages take a hit in the NCAA tournament the last 2 years. So,
because the ball.
Yeah. I mean, that's the theory anyway. That's we didn't see this trend before they added the ball. So that could be an issue too. I mean,
what's the difference on the ball? Is it the texture of it?
Yeah,
the
it is
size,
the grippiness. The size is not
the
hopefully
logoing?
not a difference in that, but
the logoing maybe. Or?
I think it's just the feel of the ball. How deep the grooves are, the stickiness of the
Well,
ball.
In talking to Utah State was a lot like BYU this year. That's how Utah State was last year. They were a big 3-point volume shooting team, and talking to those players after the game, they were livid with that basketball.
Oh, really?
Oh, they were beyond upset with it.
Yeah, that seems to be the feeling, is that there's the ball is just like not what anybody is used to, and we see it in the shooting percentage. So I don't know how that's going to look this year. I don't know if there's any adjustments in that regard, but that is something to keep track of here when the games start.
I got to tell you, I wouldn't buy much into that, but one of my favorite conversations I ever had with Jeff Hornacek, I got to be pretty good friends with him while he was helping with the Jazz. I was still playing professionally, got to know him a little bit. And I had a conversation with him about the details of shooting. And Ken, he told me that on a typical pass from Stockton or a typical pass from Brian, doesn't really matter. He could actually know or see the rotation of the ball, and he could catch the stripe on his finger. And he knew the feeling of the stripe so well that as he was catching it, before you could bat an eye or blink an eye, he would have that stripe or that divot in that finger at the exact shooting point that he's done 1,000 times. I was shocked by the details of a good shooter and how much they know where the pass is coming from and how to adjust the ball without even thinking about it. So I could see how a ball would play into it.
Yeah, the NBA is different from the NCAA. The NBA uses the same brand of ball for every game, whereas in the NCAA, the home team gets to choose. They can choose from a variety of approved balls, but the home team gets to choose what brand of ball to use. And so you can use slightly different equipment from game to game, which is pretty unusual.
All right, let's shift gears. We'll have the Utah State game as they take on TCU, an 8-9 matchup. I know, the committee essentially told the Mountain West, we'll give you your 6 teams, but you're not going to like your seeds. Utah State thought they deserved higher than an 8, but they get that 8-9 matchup with TCU. And again, looking at your numbers and knowing Utah State, this is not a good matchup for Utah State. Like what Utah State does poorly, TCU does very well. Utah State has struggled as of late, defensive rebounding. TCU is an elite offensive rebounding team. Utah State needs to shoot the 3 ball pretty well against TCU. They're not a good 3-point shooting team. I think Aggie fans should probably be a little concerned about this matchup.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you nailed it down pretty well. This is a classic Jamie Dixon team. TCU are going back to his days at Pitt. He relies on the few coaches that still stresses that, and their offense is generally unremarkable, but because they offensive rebound so well, they have a passable offense. So, if Utah State can keep them off the offensive glass, they'll have a shot here. This is not necessarily a mismatch by any means. It should be a pretty solid game. Obviously for Utah State, a lot of their offense comes from the interior, and so Osibor can get off and have his typical game. Then I think Utah State can take this, but it will be a really tough matchup, as you mentioned.
So, Ken, we kind of had a drive-by question thrown at Scotty yesterday from Brian Estridge. He's the voice of TCU. And he was on with us and said, well, yeah, I heard you guys talking about TCU beating Houston. Yeah, definitely a great win. And he said, and Scotty, tell us what would be Utah State's best win. According to KenPom.com and you, what is Utah State's best win, and how does it compete with, whether it's TCU's win against Houston or their win on the road against Baylor? How does it compete with those wins?
Right. Yeah, their best win was at Boise State, the overtime game back in January. And, yeah, nothing really competes with a win over Houston. Houston's a 1 seed, so it's going to be pretty hard to compete with that. I mean, I think the Mountain West provided solid competition this year. The top of the league was strong. You just don't have those elite teams that the Big 12 has. So you don't face that level of competition, but they faced good competition and performed pretty well against it. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the whole conference breaks down in this tournament. We've seen, the last 2 years, there's been a little bit of a disappointment, certainly outside of the San Diego State run. So there's a little bit of pressure, I feel like, on Mountain West teams, not just Utah State specifically, but certainly teams like Colorado State or New Mexico or Nevada. I think all three of those teams are favored in their first games. So, it's going to be imperative, I think, for those teams to get W's to, I think, justify nationally the 6 bids that they got.
In your opinion, just take out prior tradition or prior success, all that other stuff from the years prior, just focusing on this season and what they've done this season, did the Mountain West get hosed?
I mean, from a seeding standpoint, yeah, a little bit. I mean, it was especially surprising. Like New Mexico wouldn't even have gotten in it. They won the conference tournament, which was pretty surprising. But yeah,
that they won the tournament or that they got in?
No, that they would not have made the tournament.
Yeah, both. I mean, it's surprising to some extent that they won the tournament as a 6 seed. Obviously, they're a really good team, but the Mountain West was so tough. I think anybody who won it would be a surprise. But yeah, the surprise was that when the seeds came out, it was apparent like they're seeded below any at-large team, so they would not have gotten into the NCAA tournament had they not won the Mountain West tournament.
By the way, I've got them beating Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problems with that. That's not an upset.
So do I.
Yeah, that should be a pretty nice draw for them. I mean, it's a great opportunity.
Well, I just the way that House is playing and Mashburn's playing and the rest of that team. I mean, just watching them up close, they're just crazy athletic. And the old adage, guards in March, and they certainly loaded with that.
Donovan Dent, yeah, he's an outstanding player. JT Toppin, one of the best freshmen in the country. So, yeah, it's a team where you really can't focus on one player. They got a number of guys that can contribute, and it should serve them well. I mean, I probably would say San Diego State is like built the best to make a deep run, but New Mexico is a close second, I think.
I was looking at TCU's roster, and we were going over it with Brian Estridge, and there might be one clear individual on the roster that's kind of the standout, but I think he was second team Big 12. I think he was the only one to get Big 12 honors, wasn't he, Scotty?
Yeah,
on TCU's roster.
So,
I think it was second team Big 12. Ken, in the past, and as you work numbers and do your business, how much does it play in that Utah State has the Mount West Conference Player of the Year? They've got a clear number one, even though you could talk a little bit about Brown and even Danny Sprinkle said in a comment, if Brown is not the Mount West Conference Player of the Year, he made a pretty pointed reference to it. But you've got a standout number one in Great Osborne. In your experience, those standout stars in comparison to a roster that doesn't really have a standout, how does that typically play out?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a trend. I mean, you do typically see, I think, like true mid-majors that tend to rely on the one big scorer. I don't know that Osborne really is, he doesn't have that big a share in the offense. He's obviously a clear number one for the team, but he's not an overwhelming guy who they, have to rely on to put the team on its back. So it can go either way. I mean, you can look at the teams that made the Final Four last year. I mean, I don't think any of them were dependent on one player. They all had kind of well-rounded lineups. So I think more often than not, those are the type of teams that have success. You do occasionally have the stories where, Carmelo Anthony carries a team to a title or whatever, but that was, 20 years ago. There haven't been a lot of cases since then like that. So, TCU's tough in that respect. They're also almost all seniors, right? So it's yeah. I mean, they're one of the most experienced teams in the country.
How much does that play into it too? You see any correlation? Because I think in D1 experience, they're number 3 or number 4 in college basketball. So how much is there any breakdown on how much that can help you in terms of making a tournament run? Ultimately, talent's what matters the most. But
right, yeah. I mean, it's hard to separate that from talent. The one thing that is tough to succeed with is a really young team. If you're all freshmen and sophomores, that's a really difficult blueprint. You do need some upperclassmen, in your rotation to provide some stability to the team. But once you have that, I don't think it really matters how, your experience is off the charts or your age is off the charts, I don't know that it matters a whole lot.
Well, and honestly, it might work against you because if you have a lot of D1 experience, that means you're not good enough to go to the pros. Because if you could, you would.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's sort of the market, the corner as a coach is like find those guys who are really good college players who can't quite make the jump. So I don't know that Jamie Dixon has necessarily gone that route. He doesn't necessarily have guys who are, super high recruits who are trying to get, going to have great careers in the NBA. But you do see that from some of these great teams that they get a guy who magically kind of sticks around for 4 years who people thought maybe early on would have gone to the NBA.
So we were talking about this last year, and maybe we can hang on to it, but we can maybe get in a little bit deeper later. But last year, some of the best talent wasn't even in the NCAAs. You didn't have the Wembanyama, you didn't have the Scoots. And is it the same this year? Are we missing some of the greatest talent that's available?
No question. Yeah, I mean it's probably even more dramatic this year. The 5 of the top 10 picks I think are going to be non-college players, and they're the best. Some of the best college players are in this event. Rob Dillingham at Kentucky, Reed Shepherd at Kentucky, Cody Williams at Colorado. I mean, those are some of the names that should get drafted pretty high. But for the most part, yeah, there's not a lot of like marquee names in this event that we've seen, in the past.
Take a break, come back. We're live at JCW's. We are in Lehigh. We want you to come by, hang out, grab some food, and check out all the great menu items here, whether it be burgers, the wings, the cheese fries.
It's all good, man. How about the fish and chips? We haven't even talked about the fish and chips.
I've never had the fish and chips.
Oh, it's so good, man. Deep fried, big old chunks of fresh fish in a really nice batter with some of those fries, Scotty. And they've got fresh house-made tartar sauce that's just incredible. But I would suggest get the fries separate and get them loaded, whether you do the chili cheese fries or just the cheese fries. But that cheddar melted on top of the fries, so good. And their fry sauce is unique. It's original, and it's house-made. All of their sauces are house-made. The ranch, the blue cheeses, all of it, the best ingredients, best sauces. And I know that we focus a lot on the burgers and the steak sandwich, and they do some great salads. If you're into the salads, you were just getting the rundown on the burger salad.
Yeah, you can order any burger you want and say, I want it salad style, and they'll chop it up, put it in a tub, and you can have it essentially protein style.
But you can have your favorite burger. What's the Hawaiian burger or the double cheese or, these amazing burgers that they put together. But you got to top it all off with one of their amazing shakes. I mean, this is known as the shake place. If you're out there for a good classic shake, come in. You can get the mini, and the mini is not mini. It is gigantic. It will feed me. Okay, so the mini would feed me, but it would feed maybe 2 or 3 people on a given occasion. But great food here at JCW.
And again, a lot of locations, but we're here in Lehigh, so come by, hang out, and let's talk brackets with Ken Pomroy right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. got it. In honor of Mark Pope, Matt Norlander went through and asked every coach in the NCAA tournament who their favorite musician is. And Mark Pope went T-Swizzle, went Taylor Swift. And by the way, Danny Sprinkle went with Prince, which I thought was a
Great selection.
great selection. I wouldn't have put Danny Sprinkle. I would have put him a little bit more on the countryside.
Creed?
I would not have gone him. Yeah, no.
Oh, on the countryside?
Countryside, yeah. But
Little Old Dominion?
let's give away some tickets right now. Call number 12, 801-575-ZONE. You win a pair of tickets. See the Jazz and the Mavericks at the Delta Center coming up on March 25th. You want those tickets? Be calling number 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. I don't know. You surprised with a little Taylor Swift there, Ken?
I don't know. It actually kind of makes sense for Mark Pope, honestly.
Will that affect the numbers next year?
Might have to dock the team a little bit for that one.
Just drop them off the face of the earth.
Right.
I'm waiting for somebody to have Selena Gomez. I wouldn't mind it. A little Selena
Nobody's
Gomez.
going to take Selena Gomez.
She's better than Taylor Swift, though. You got to admit that.
No.
Would you admit that?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
No, I would not admit that. Yeah, Kelvin Sampson was the only one who went with the Eagles, which would have been where I would have gone.
Where would you go, Ken?
I think I'd go Foo Fighters.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice call.
Very solid.
A lot of Dave Matthews bands coming up here. Chris Jans, even Richard Pitino.
Well, that means we got a lot of 90s coaches in there.
Yep. We do have one Old Dominion, Dan Monson of a Long Beach State, who, again, that's one of the best stories of the tournament.
Right.
You get fired, and then you're like, all right, but we still need you to coach the team. All right, fine. I'll just go out and win my conference tournament.
Out of spite.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Did the
Just
old,
going to keep coaching.
yeah,
I'll
exactly.
show you.
All right, let's go through some number one seeds. Your four number ones, UConn, Houston, Purdue, and you have to go all the way down to number 9 in your rankings. North Carolina picks up a number one seed. I know a lot of Kansas State fans are a little cranky about not being a number one seed. And Auburn you have as number 4 in your rankings. They're a 4th seed, but what jumps out? What surprised you the most with those number one seeds?
Well, I don't know. I think all those seeds were pretty much expected. I mean, yeah, Iowa State should have gotten more consideration than they did for a 1, especially after Carolina lost in the ACC title game. But the committee has a pretty strong history at this point of ignoring almost anything that happens in those conference tournaments from like Thursday onward. So, maybe it wasn't too surprising that the 1 seeds fell the way they did. The top 3, have separated themselves from the country pretty much all year. So, wasn't a lot of drama there. I think the real surprise was that, UConn, not that they got the overall number 1, but that they got placed in the toughest region. So they were really done no favors other than they get to play close to home, which is a nice perk, but they're going to have a very tough road to get to the Final Four.
Well, what makes the East the toughest region? I mean, as you mentioned, UConn, they're at the number 1, but what really separates that as the toughest region in your opinion?
Yeah, they're in there with Auburn, who is, as we mentioned, 4th in my ratings and the number 4 seed. So, really a team is playing on a 1 or a 2 seed level, and UConn's going to have to play them in the Sweet 16. And then the 2 and the 3 seeds are very tough as well. Iowa State and Illinois are both in my top 10. Iowa State has the number 1 defense in the country. So, all of those potential matchups as they get to the Elite 8 are going to be quite challenging as well. And we're just kind of glossing over the fact that they might have a rematch, or not a rematch, but a game against last year's Final Four team in Florida Atlantic in the second round. So just a number of, just kind of a minefield there for UConn right now. They're the best team in the country, but their road to getting to the Final Four is also clearly the hardest of all the number 1s.
Do you think that was done purposely or just how the seed list kind of played out?
Yeah, I just don't think the committee does anything purposely. I know we look at the bracket and we see matchups and we think, oh, they planned that out, but they're just so occupied. I mean, you did the mock selection, so you kind of have a feel for that, but they're just so occupied with trying to get all these teams in consistent with bracketing principles and get the seeds correct. And they just have so much work to do that they don't have time to tee things up like that. If they did, I think they would have, put St. John's, found a way to put St. John's in the field, right? Like that obviously would be a very juicy situation.
A St. John's, New Mexico matchup would have been nice.
Absolutely,
sure.
Yeah.
Just to stay on that East bracket with UConn for just a second, because it is the bracket the BYU sits in. A couple of other observations with it. You take last year's championship game in San Diego State and you throw San Diego State in the East. I don't know how much last year's experience plays into this year's game and matchups, but you're taking last year's champion run in San Diego State, throwing them in there, and then you're taking two of the Big 12's best and throwing them in the bracket. You mentioned 2-seed Iowa State, and of course 6-seed BYU is sitting in that bracket, so that makes it difficult. You throw in Auburn, and I can see why the East is just nasty.
Yeah, it's loaded. I mean, yeah, we're assuming, Auburn's going to make it to the Sweet 16, but obviously San Diego State can get there as well. It's a different team in that they have a one of the more prolific scorers that Brian Dutcher has ever had in terms of Jaden Ledee on the team.
He's a fantastic player.
Yeah, absolutely. But the DNA of the team is pretty similar. It's still just a defense-first team. The numbers are, scarily identical to last year.
Are they?
Yeah, so – they're still a 5-seed, and they deserve a 5-seed. I mean, they're not one of the best teams in the country, but they're also capable of.
What were they last year?
I do think they were a 5-seed last year.
They were a 5-seed last year.
I do think it's funny though that they had the same seed in the NCAA tournament as they had in the Mountain West Conference tournament as a 5-seed.
Yeah.
But they went 11-7 in Mountain West play. But I also think that's a team that can flip the switch because of what they do defensively. I mean, they can just turn it on at any given moment. They don't have the scoring necessarily across the board that they had last year, but Ledee is just, I mean, he's a phenomenal player. I want to shift gears. Let's talk about Houston. Houston just in that region with what they've got laid out in front of them in the South. Where does that South rank in terms of the hierarchy of the four regions? And can Houston make a pretty logical claim of having I don't want to say an easy path, but a decent path to getting to that Final Four?
Right. I mean, I think it's a good way to put it. The other three regions, I think, have their own weaknesses and flaws. They're pretty similar strength-wise. But certainly, you look at the 2-seed. I mean, Marquette's a little vulnerable, and that Tyler Kolek has been banged up for them.
Yep.
Hasn't played lately, and it's uncertain exactly how healthy he'll be in the tournament. Kentucky as a 3-seed has become a very popular pick to come out of that region. However, defensively, they're just not good. I mean, that's putting it kindly. They're almost kind of a joke defensively. They're not ranked in the top 100.
Kentucky?
Yes. Oh. Yeah. So, a team that relies on younger players and very skilled players that can generate offense, but defensively, they've just struggled to find an identity all year. And maybe that'll improve in the tournament, but there's only so far you can go from being outside the top 100. And so I don't have a lot of confidence in them. I mean, the real maybe challenging team for Houston could be Duke, who has been up and down this season. It is not a typical dominant Duke team. They're a 4-seed for a reason, but they do seem to be the most complete team outside of Houston in that region.
So just sticking kind of in that South region with Houston and what we're seeing there, the Big 12 with a 1-seed in Houston and a 2-seed in Iowa State, that's only shared with the Big East that has a 1 and a 2-seed. How dominant was the Big 12 just in terms of talent, in terms of big teams, big names, and a full conference, maybe in compared to years past or in comparison to the conferences that we have right now?
Right. I mean, they were pretty clearly ranked number 1 in my ratings among conferences. So that would be the 9th time in the last 11 years that that's happened. So, there's just this long trend of the Big 12 being the best conference in the country. That said, there was plenty of criticism from coaches in other leagues regarding some of the scheduling philosophies of Big 12 teams, and some some claims that the Big 12 quote gamed the system in terms of.
Yeah, you saw a lot of that. There was a lot of noise on that.
So the tournament's going to be a little bit of a test of that, and there are some challenges there. Like, the top two teams in the league, Houston and Iowa State, like their profiles are kind of lopsided on the defensive side, and typically it's kind of a challenge for those teams to have a lot of success in the tournament. BYU had a great year, but historically, their tournament record is not great, right? Like,
that's putting it nicely.
They've been to the tournament 30 times. They've won 15 games. So.
Way to soften that blow.
Trying to be nice.
Not great.
Kansas is banged up. Their two best players are hurt. So there are some challenges here. I mean, it's not guaranteed that the Big 12 is going to have a ton of success in the tournament. It is going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Is it fair to bang on a conference when they don't have a good showing in the tournament?
Well, I think tournament performance is overblown for the quality of a conference, but it is a factor. And, when it's extreme, like if the Big 12, they have 8 teams, right, in the tournament, if they only send one to the second weekend, like I think the criticism would be deserved. You can't discount everything that happened in the regular season. Like the Big 12 was still a really solid league, but maybe they weren't, clearly the best league if that happened. So tournament performance matters. It's not the only thing, but I do think it's a factor.
All right, we'll take a break, come back. Coming up next, we'll continue on to look at some of the other number 1 seeds. North Carolina, maybe a bit of a surprise. Purdue, a potential second-round matchup if Utah State gets past TCU. So you might see Danny Sprinkle up against the Boilermakers in an 8-1 matchup if both can take care of business in the first round. So we'll take a look at the Boilermakers as well. Coming up next, it's your bracket preview show with Ken Pomroy, Hans and Scotty, live here at JCW's in Lehigh, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Or Ute spring ball update right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Not only are the Utes bringing back a lot of key players, one in particular at tight end, Brant Keithy, talks about his decision to return for another season. Hans and Scotty, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's our bracket preview show with Ken Pomroy right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. All right, let's get to some of these other number one seeds. Let's start with, we've talked about UConn. We've talked about Houston. Let's go North Carolina. Lost to NC State in the ACC tournament. That was a great story, watching NC State win 5 games in 5 days. But North Carolina, a little bit of a surprise as a 1 seed, or was it a surprise as a 1 seed?
Well, I think based on the resume, they weren't a surprise. You can compare the resume to anybody else. Iowa State, Tennessee, I think were the other contenders. The resumes were pretty similar, so it wasn't a huge surprise. Maybe the surprise is, they're 9th in my rating, so they're not as strong as the other ones. They're, he mentioned coaches coming after the Big 12, and a lot of those coaches that came after the Big 12 were in the ACC. So North Carolina trying to defend the honor of the ACC as a 1 seed, and that that region isn't particularly difficult, but Arizona is rated slightly higher, so actually kind of the favorite to come out of that region. So it's gonna be interesting to see what Carolina does. They've been building for this moment for a while. Armando Bacot coming back to play for them for a 5th year. RJ Davis, another senior. So it's it's been all building for this year to kind of culminate in North Carolina making a deep run. So we'll see how it plays out there.
You mentioned some of the names on that team, but what is the best attribute of this North Carolina team being a 1 seed?
Yeah, they're a solid defense. They're playing a little more up tempo this year. When Hubert Davis took over, he didn't really inherit the Roy Williams mindset of more of an up tempo offense, but they've gotten back to this season and had some effectiveness with that. Their offense isn't all that impressive, but they do have the 6th ranked defense, and so make things difficult for their opponent.
And then on the flip side, Purdue, I'm really hoping I get to see Purdue, and that means I'm calling a W against TCU. But Utah State, if they win, will most likely play Purdue, as much as we'd like to see a Danny Sprinkle Montana State matchup in the round of 32. Likelihood of that's pretty slim. But Purdue, the number 1 seed, Zach Edney, obviously, everybody knows about him and what he's done. But Purdue, give me your thoughts on him and or your thoughts on that program.
Right. Well, if people are familiar with what Purdue did last year, obviously losing in the first round after having a really nice regular season. It's almost the exact same team coming back. Zach Edey's been awesome. He's a force of nature. He's clearly the best player in college basketball. And then he's surrounded by role players who have stepped up this year. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, their backcourt, have improved. They brought in a transfer, Lance Jones, who is another guard that is a solid player and a good shooter. So they are a little bit better this year, kind of all the way around the board. I would love to see an Edey Osibor matchup in the middle. Both of those players just draw fouls in incredible amounts, so it might end up being a free throw shooting contest. But pretty interesting. Edey
essentially wins your Player of the Year standings. Do you hand out like trophies, or how do you ship off a trophy to Purdue?
I don't, but if there's any trophy makers listening to the show, I'd be happy to do it.
That'd be kind of fun to do.
It would, and when I started, when I came up with this Player of the Year like 10 years ago or so, I thought I would do that. Just come up with like a weird, goofy looking trophy with a bunch of numbers on it or something. But I could never pull the trigger.
Just looking at the numbers on this, he wins this, and not by a slight margin, like by a large amount. Is that about as big a differential? I've not tracked that much at all.
Right.
Is you usually your winner heads and tails above everybody else, or
No.
is this one pretty unique?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is easily the most dominant single season performance that a player's had since I've been tracking. He also won 24 MVPs, game MVPs. So I give, MVPs for each game based on the stats, and 24 in one season is already a single season record. And obviously, he'll be able to add to that.
The next best, Edie's got 24. Xavier Johnson, Enrique Freeman, and Shahada Wells from McNeese State, and I guess Deron Holmes of Dayton have 16. That's the next best. I mean, that's incredible.
What all goes into the KenPom metrics for you to pick that player of the year?
It's really just looking at there's two components to it. One is like the player contribution to the team. So, how much they contribute to the team in terms of their efficiency and how involved they are in the offense. And there's some of the defensive stats that are included as well. And then there's a team component as well, so how good the team is.
Okay.
So both of those things go into the mix. And
so wins and losses play in. Weekly, you said weekly conference honors?
No. Just their contributions to the team. So, Edie's like usage is off the charts in that offense, and Purdue's one of the best teams in the country. So you put those two together, and there's nobody else even close.
So just staying in the Midwest for a second, you're seeing the highest seeded SEC team in Tennessee as a 2 seed. And the SEC got a bunch of bids, Ken, but their highest seed was Tennessee. So talk a little bit about the SEC and specifically where Tennessee fits into all this equation.
Well, the SEC was the most entertaining conference in the country because a lot of their teams, they did one of two things. They either played at a fast pace or they weren't totally committed to the defensive end, or both. So that led to
as you were mentioning with Auburn.
That led to a lot of high-scoring games, a lot of games in the 80s and 90s, and a bunch of games where teams scored over 100. So really entertaining league. Tennessee fit that profile in the sense that they did play somewhat up-tempo. They do have a really good defense. Both Tennessee and Auburn, the reason they're highly rated in my system is they both had great defenses. But then you had teams like Alabama and Kentucky and Florida who did not play good defense. Good offenses, but did not play good defenses. Really up-tempo, so really high-scoring games. But those teams are probably not particularly built to make deep runs. But certainly Tennessee and Auburn are two teams to watch.
All right, 2 o'clock straight up, live at JCW's here in Lehigh. We'll get more into your bracket coming up next. If you got questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can tweet at us at 97.5 Hands, at Scotty G Zone. Ken Pomroy, again, get to kenpom.com, favorite website out there. If you're a college basketball fan, that is a must. It's been around forever. Ken does such a tremendous job and has been doing it for, 25, 26 years now?
About 20 years with, 6 years backfilled prior to that.
Oh, okay, because, I see we can get stats back to 99.
Yes.
That's crazy. Just an incredible amount of work put together. Ken Pomroy, kenpom.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Ken Pomroy as well. But get those questions in. We'll take a deeper dive. Of course, we got to ask the obligatory, what's Ken's most logical 5-12 upset? Any other teams that we should be keeping an eye on that aren't necessarily being talked about? All of those coming up next, live at JCW's in Lehigh. Again, Hans, let's get some food in you too.
Well, that's what it's all about at JCW's. And I know our listeners out there, they've experienced it. It is the best food that you can find when it comes to burgers, or even I've been talking about their fish and chips. And, Scotty, they're using halibut in their fish and chips right now. It's a fresh halibut. It's a house-made batter. It is freshly fried. Nothing is left under a heating lamp and soaks in a bunch of grease. It's all crispy. It's all incredible and juicy and fresh. So I love their fish and chips. I can't talk highly enough about it. But if you're really trying to cut the calories, and maybe some of you are out there, you do have the salad options. And they've got all kinds of different salad options for you. But I love to just come in. Like, for instance, they've got, 10 screens in here every corner. We're going to be out here for the NCAA tournament. Now, my favorite thing to do is when I've got a big game or something that I want to watch, I come down to JCW's. I order up a dozen of their wings. And they've got some classic buffalo wings that are just amazing with their house-made blue cheese and their house-made ranch. So please come down, enjoy JCW's. I love the crew. I love Clay, one of the original owners and creators at JCW's. I just love the group down here. They've always been so good to me, and the food is perfection.
JCW's in Lehigh right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome on back. It's our bracket preview show with the great Ken Pomroy. You can get to the website, kenpom.com. That's kenpom.com. Ken has been slinging out the data for over 2 decades now and has really been putting together a tremendous product. I'm a huge fan. I'm a subscriber and have been so for almost 20 years as well. So it is worth every amount of and again, look, you can get some basic information for free. You can go in depth, but there's all kinds of great analysis available for you. I think $20 a year. I think is
$22, Scotty.
That's money well spent. Money very well spent. And if you're looking at getting a return on your NCAA bracket, then that there you go. Just call it an investment for sure.
Exactly.
You still loving what you're doing?
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah, I can't beat it.
It's your world, right? It's got to be this is it's your passion. It's your love.
Watching basketball games and coding hands. I mean, who wouldn't like that?
Didn't you start with like a breakdown of high school or something like that? Or how did this all start?
Yeah, I was a grad student at the University of Wyoming, and I wanted to develop a rating system that could rate anything. So I started rating like high school football games in Wyoming. And oddly enough, I don't know if anybody cares about this story, but like it was 1999. The star player in Wyoming high school football was a gentleman by the name of Sundance Wicks. And Sundance Wicks is now the head basketball coach at Green Bay, who actually had a pretty decent season this year. So it's kind of interesting how both of our careers.
Wicks.
Yeah, what a name, right?
That is a heck of a name for sure. When was the first moment where you felt like, wow, people are really paying attention to this? Was there a moment like or a reference or maybe a coach reached out where somebody's like, and you think, wow, people are actually paying attention to this stuff?
Yeah, there's been a few moments like that. Certainly one of the first was, getting mentioned in Sports Illustrated back when Sports Illustrated was a big deal, like 2006. Grant Wall was a writer there, and he kind of picked up my work and did a big tournament preview kind of featuring my work back then. So that really got things started. And then, you started seeing coaches like Sean Miller and Brad Stevens mentioning my name in interview or in press conferences, and that just added another layer of legitimacy to what I was doing.
That's awesome. In that 20 plus years, you've been covering the Pac-12. How are you feeling about the implosion and the separation of the Pac-12?
It's a huge bummer, no doubt about it. I mean, it's especially, lived out here most of that time, so followed the conference really closely and watched a lot of games late at night. And it's just hard to fathom that, teams on the West Coast are going to be playing in the Big Ten, and some teams are going to the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to be awesome next year. Some of the teams they're adding, but it's a bummer that the Pac-12 is going away.
I mean, that Big 12 is going to be a juggernaut.
They just somehow seem to figure out how to. I mean, I know most of these moves are based in football, but somehow they figure out how to improve the basketball conference no matter who they add. It's pretty wild.
Is there a Pac-12 team in the years that you've been covering it that stands out as the best Pac-12 team in the Pac-12 era?
Off the top of my head, I mean,
because it's been a long time since they've had a champion.
That's the thing. There's no
that Arizona. What was it? 96 team.
97, I believe.
97,
right?
Yeah.
Miles Simon. Yeah, it's been a pretty long drought since then. I mean, the Big Ten has had a drought of its own, but the Pac-12 was something else. Yeah, there haven't been a ton of great teams. I mean, UCLA's had runs there, or the Russell Westbrook team maybe in the mid to late 2000s, something like that. They had some Final Four runs. Those are probably the best teams that the conference has had.
So now you take those Pac-12
Toby
teams.
Bailey's not walking through that door anytime soon. How's that for a poll?
That's a great poll. That's outstanding.
Random reference. So now, as Scotty mentioned, those Pac-12 teams joining up with the Big 12. Now you add Arizona into the Big 12, who is currently a 2 seed. Talk about just the level of play Arizona is putting on the court right now and what you're seeing from them and what the Big 12 can expect with some of their history and pageantry.
Right. So, credit to Tommy Lloyd. He really kind of swapped out guards this year. Kirk Kriisa, you may remember, was kind of a staple of Arizona basketball for the last couple of years. And his dad was a big Steve Kerr fan. He was just destined to play for Arizona, but that didn't really work out. And they kind of mutually agreed to part ways, I think. And then they brought Caleb Love in from North Carolina, who's really a transfer success story, just found a better system to play in. He's making better decisions in a more up-tempo offense. He still takes quite a few bad shots, but his efficiency has really improved this year. And so the team is just, more solid offensively under his leadership. And, it's another team it's pretty well rounded. The issue is, like, almost every close game they played this year, they've lost. And so it's how much do you trust this team that they're going to, maybe the first game, won't be close. But after that, once you get to the second round, Sweet 16, you're going to be in games that come down to the last possession. So how much do you trust a team that has had a history of struggling and has a guy in Caleb Love and maybe doesn't make the best decisions on shot selection and things like that? That's the question. But talent-wise, they're certainly capable of making a deep run.
So let's go to the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga and St. Mary's both getting 5 seeds, and I think there's some people that kind of raise their eyebrows at that one a little bit, with both those teams getting 5s out of the West Coast Conference. St. Mary's winning the tournament and earning the 5 seed. They'll take on Grand Canyon, a team I really like, and then you got you've got Gonzaga as their 5 seed as well. And they've got McNeese in that 5-12 matchup. Kind of break down those 2 games. And then the other 5 seeds, Wisconsin against a red-hot James Madison team that I don't think anybody wants to play, in San Diego State against UAB in the other 5-12. Which one of those jumps out at you as the potential 5-12 upset? Because more often than not, we get one of them.
Right. I mean, the thing this year is that the 12s are probably weaker than they have been in most years, just because of all the upsets we saw in conference tournaments, right? So those bottom seed lines are a little bit weaker than they have been in the past. I will say the 5-12 game I'm looking forward to the most is the Gonzaga-McNeese game, and that will take place here, at the Delta Center. So, kind of a treat if you're going to be out there in the evening on Thursday night. But McNeese, coached by Will Wade, plays a very aggressive defensive system. They're going to press most of the game, going to try to force a bunch of turnovers. Gonzaga, not a vintage Gonzaga team, but still good. I mean, I think the 5 seed was deserved for both Gonzaga and St. Mary's. They both had solid seasons, and I think they're both capable of winning a couple of games. But that Gonzaga-McNeese game should be pretty exciting.
What about James Madison? Where are you at on the Dukes?
Yeah, they're a solid team as well. I mean, Wisconsin, I think, finally got its act together in the Big Ten tournament. So, I do think they'll move on. But James Madison has had just an outstanding year, from the very beginning when they went to Michigan State and beat them. I think people thought that was a huge upset at the time. But as it turns out, looking back on it, an upset, but not that big of an upset. And coming in with the longest winning streak in the country. So, they're a very solid team.
You mentioned that Gonzaga and St. Mary's are both deserving of a 5 seed, BYU getting the 6 seed, and I think we've all agreed, and the numbers show that they should have been a 5 seed.
Right.
Do you believe BYU to win the West Coast Conference this year? Had they been in it?
I think it would have been a good battle. I mean, all 3 of those teams are pretty evenly rated in my system. And
are they? They're all kind of neck and neck.
Yeah, they're all, Gonzaga 15, BYU 16, St. Mary's 20. So they're all quite similar. It would have been a good battle, but
because we're all kind of sitting around like, geez, man, the year they move into the Big 12 and Gonzaga's down, and they would have finally got that elusive West Coast Conference title, and it's like, what?
Did we really need to see San Diego and Loyola Marymount come to the Marriott Center for another year, though?
Yeah,
we're not going to make that trade, are we?
Not so much. Not so much.
No, there's no doubt. Is there other teams that we should be paying attention to? Some lower seeded teams, maybe from 6 on. And I know you get asked this. You probably can't stop at a gas station without somebody asking you this question. But who are some of the teams that maybe aren't getting a lot of love, whether they're Power 5 or not, that are lower seeded that you feel like can make a deep run?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the top 3 teams are so strong that it depends what I mean by a deep run. But certainly, I think
Sweet 16.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado, out of the first 4. I mean, if you're looking for a team that makes a run out of that bracket in Dayton, they open with Boise State. They'll play a Florida team who lost their starting center to a broken leg in the last game they played. So, they're one of those teams that doesn't play great defense to begin with. So that's potentially an issue. And then, Colorado conceivably would have Marquette if they, were to get to the Sweet 16, and Marquette's a little banged up themselves. So that's kind of a team I like. Michigan State has been a team that's been ranked really high in my system all year, despite losing a bunch of games. They lost 14 games this season, but they're ranked 18th. And
never bet against Tom Izzo.
Yeah, you can't bet against Tom Izzo. I don't know that his tournament success has been off the charts lately, but they're going to be well coached and solid, and they're matched up conceivably with North Carolina in a second round game. So We talked about that, how they're the weakest of the 1 seed. So that would be a pretty fascinating game to watch as well. So I think those are 2 teams that I'd pick off immediately.
What are your thoughts on South Carolina?
Yeah, South Carolina, a team that resume-wise, really strong, won a lot of games in a quality conference. Scoring margin-wise, their numbers are pretty disappointing, and they have a really tough draw in terms of picking Oregon, in their first game. Oregon, a team, we've seen this happen before where they win their conference tournament and then they come in and maybe win a couple of games. So really difficult matchup for South Carolina. Just a team that, if they do make a run, it's probably going to be, in games that come down to the wire because they really don't have the type of team that's been able to put their opponents away.
Ken, what do you think about these programs that have these perennial coaches and, the blue blood programs? How much weight do you actually put into these coaches that have been there time and time again?
A little bit. I do think the experience matters. There's a compressed timeline here. You have to make the best use of your time. Quality scouting is at a premium. So coaching matters.
So what I'm asking is that, when I'm building out my bracket, if I'm looking for some of these coaches that have been around for years, St. John's didn't make the tournament, but let's say they did. And, they've got the legendary coach.
Yeah.
How much weight do you put into what that coach can do with that team in the tournament?
A little bit. I mean, it's not, it's not the first thing I necessarily look at, but certainly, like I said, it does matter, having that experience and showing you can win does matter. I'd be a little bit concerned about the track record of, a team like Purdue, which historically has not done well. I mean, in 2019, they were very close to getting to the Final Four, but outside of that, just a history of losing to inferior teams. They have a very strong team this year, and I don't expect them to lose in the first round or two. But at the same time, the history is there, and it goes beyond, I think, just simple bad luck at this point. So,
and I copied this from a tweet, and I should give credit to somebody. I don't know who it was, so I apologize. I'm sure they're not listening, but this was a national. I don't know if it was a national writer or not, but broke down some of your data in terms of determining a national champion. And he said 22 out of the last 24 national champs have had a top 18 adjusted offense. The only 2 outliers were, ironically enough, both UConn in 2011 and 2014. And then 23 out of the last 24 national champs had a top 37 defense. The 2021 Baylor was the only outlier, and that was the COVID year. So you could even maybe throw that out. So
what was the offense?
Top 18 and then top 37 defense. So if you combine those two, based on that leaves you with 7 teams that are legitimate national title contenders: UConn, Houston, Purdue, Arizona, Creighton, Auburn, and Duke. Now that would leave off teams like North Carolina, Iowa State, Tennessee, Marquette, Illinois, Baylor, Kentucky, Alabama, and Kansas. So just hearing that, does that make sense to you, Ken? I mean, was that something that would resonate with you?
It does on the one hand. I mean, you do have to have good offense and good defense to win, and typically you need a really good offense. I'm a little, those kind of facts are made to be broken, essentially. Top 37 is a very specific cutoff, right? Like, you're the 38th ranked defense. Are we going to eliminate you?
It looks like he's looking for a number to, like a number
exactly.
to hit.
Yeah. So I think the general concept makes sense. To get too bogged down in the specifics and, eliminate a team like Tennessee because their offense is, 29th and not 17th or something is, maybe going a little bit too far.
Yeah. If you had to just look at, because, he's got UConn on the list, but UConn's got he's got the worst, that's the worst region to come through. I mean, it's not as simplistic as this, obviously, because you have to look at matchups and everything else that goes into it. But if you just looking at the bracket, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, if Ken Pomroy is filling out a bracket, who would you have winning the whole thing?
Ken Pomroy is filling out a bracket. He's picking a team that he can root for. First of all, that's good, and then he can root for. I like to align.
Is there a likability number for Ken?
I like to align my personal interests with the team I'm picking. So yeah, obviously UConn's a really good team, and they probably realistically have the best chance of winning. And they're a fine team, but they won it last year, obviously, and most of your fellow bracketers are going to pick UConn. So I like Houston. they're such a fun team to watch. They get the most out of their talent. Kelvin Sampson, I feel like, you can contrast Kelvin Sampson and Danny Hurley. Danny Hurley was born into one of the, most famous basketball families in America. And Kelvin Sampson has kind of had to, go his own way, and nothing was really handed to him. And he started off coaching at Montana Tech in Dillon, Montana, which I don't know if any of you guys have been to, but it's not a basketball hotbed. And he's built his world from, I believe that's NAIA basketball to, where he is now. So it'd be cool to see him win it. It'd be cool to see Houston win it. And they're good enough to do that. So, that would be the team that I would pick, just because they're a good team and I would enjoy rooting for them.
So when Ken sat down, Scotty, I handed him my bracket and I said, man, I'm not real proud of it. And he wadded it up and threw it right back in my face and said,
do it again.
Do it again. Try again. Try harder.
Well, I noticed he had Duke and Kentucky, I think, in that South region in the Elite Eight, and that is something that I could not root for. So
I do.
Yeah, I was a little disgusted by
I got Duke coming out against Houston in the 1-4 and Kentucky in the 3-2. Went a little bit of chalk in the South, but I don't feel really comfortable. I did bring, because I do think Colorado will win the play-in, and I did bring Colorado. You get to take Boise State and Colorado in the bracket, but I took them out to the round of 32. But I have Marquette beating them and advancing. I don't know. These brackets, I can overthink it sometimes. But what I was telling Scotty, what I really wanted to try to do this year was identify the conferences I feel like were the conference kings and maybe weight a little bit towards those teams in the conference. But, I watched Texas Tech play, and I wasn't overwhelmed by Texas Tech. I've actually got them in an upset with NC State, an 11-6.
Yeah.
But as far as conferences are concerned, do you do that when you're putting together a bracket? I mean, if you did put together a bracket, do you weigh the conferences really heavy?
Not so much. It's more about the teams. I mean, obviously, if you come out of the Big 12 with 3 losses like Houston did, or 4 losses in the conference tournament, they're a pretty good team. You're playing in the best conference in the country, and you're winning the vast majority of your games. So in that sense, it matters. But I don't necessarily feel like, hey, the Big 12 is the best conference, they're going to get 2 teams in the Final Four or something like that. Like, history would tell you that's not the way it works.
What were your top 5 conferences? You mentioned the Big 12 you had as number 1.
Yeah, Big 12. I'm trying to go on memory here. Big 12, Big East, SEC, Big 10, ACC. Those would be your top 5.
SEC, Big 10, and then the ACC?
Yes.
And then Pac-12 and Mountain West, 6 and 7.
Pac-12 and Mountain West,
Boy,
6 and
razor thin between Pac-12 and Mountain West.
Right. So, I mean, the tournament, could determine where those the conferences end up landing. So certainly, if Mountain West can overachieve here, they could rise up.
Do you continue your rankings through the tournament?
Yeah, I sure do. Yep, they go right through the end of the tournament.
Hey, I know we got to go to break here, but how hard in September, October, when you start crunching numbers and putting things together for the start of the season, how much more difficult is it now with the transfer portal? I mean, we've already got like 600 kids in the portal,
right?
And Utah State had a completely new team, no returning minutes, and so how hard is it when you have situations like that and complete rebuild of teams to try to project what teams are going to do?
It's hard to maintain the data. It's hard to keep track of it all and make sure it's all accurate. But actually, like, the ratings themselves this year the preseason ratings were about as good as they've ever been. The only exception, I believe, is 2021, which was a more like compressed season. But the deal is, there's like, freshmen don't play as much. Freshmen don't contribute as much right now, probably because of the COVID year, probably because of transfers. So even though there's a bunch of players, moving teams and changing, they all have track records.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of kind of adjusting their production for their new environment. So overall, it's actually not as difficult as you might think. Yeah, we have some busts. UCLA was a team that fell off the map this year. Arkansas fell off the map. Obviously, Utah State surprised to some degree, but my ratings had them higher, I think, than the media poll or whatever. They're right around 100 to start the season. So obviously they improved on that, but it wasn't like
you didn't put them in the basement.
No, not at all. I mean, there was, you looked at the preseason ratings and there was some hope that they'd have a decent season. So actually it's kind of surprising, but yeah, it's not that hard. It's still hard. There's still surprises, but it's not harder than it used to be.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right, we're live at JCW's. Come by, hang out with us in Lehigh. So many great JCW locations up and down the Wasatch Front. We're in Lehigh, and remember, we're going to be hanging out at JCW's tomorrow and Friday for all your NCAA tournament games. And so you can come by, grab a bite to eat, watch the games with us. We're going to have a blast here, Hans.
It is. It's an incredible place just to come down and eat. And
Actually, Thursday and Friday. Sorry, not tomorrow. Yeah, I'm already trying to move ahead to the start of the games.
Yeah, but still Thursday and Friday.
Yeah,
it's big time place to come out, eat and enjoy those first rounds because they do got the big screen TVs pretty much at every corner. Every chair that you choose to sit in, you're going to be able to see those games, and then the food is unbeatable. It is fresh, it is prepared fresh, and it's all original ingredients and a lot of house-made sauces. And I just appreciated JCW's over the years for the level of importance they place on freshness, Scotty, and the level of quality of what they use, from their burger to the onions they slice up for the onion rings, to the halibut that they throw into the fish and chips, to the lettuce that they source. And I know lettuce and tomato, I know they've sourced locally. They do so many things. The cheese is always the highest quality cheese. It's just the best burger you can get by Country Mile.
Ken's got a shake. Ken, what shake are you going with?
I got the marshmallow shake. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, we got to let you go before that thing melts away, too.
It is melting away.
All right, let's get to it. We'll take a break, come back more with Ken Pomroy, your bracket preview show with Hans and Scotty, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome on back. You're listening to the Bracket Challenge preview show. Hans and Scotty with Ken Pomroy. You get to the website, kenpom.com. All the information you need as you fill out your bracket so you can have all the bragging rights inside your office. All right. By the way, Matt Norlander of CBS Sports reached out to every coach and asked them their favorite musician. That's why we're playing some of them. We got a couple Eagles on there.
How many Neil Diamonds were there?
There was 0 Neil Diamonds. Sorry.
Brackets are irrelevant.
You go down, actually, you got a bunch of Michael Jacksons in there.
Interesting.
Greg McDermott of Creighton is a big Jimmy Buffett fan.
Any Lionel Richies?
No Lionel Richies. Well, no, not really. I thought we might see a Commodores in there, but no Commodores. Let's see. Dana Altman is an Eagles fan. Bill Self, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Will Wade, Earth, Wind, and Fire. That surprises me a little bit. By the way, what's the Will Wade? What's the demand for his services going to be in the off season?
That's a good question. I haven't heard his name connected to a lot of jobs, but you would think that he would be kind of popular, especially now that the NCAA enforcement wing has kind of been neutered. Like, why not go after Will Wade? He would make you an instant winner. He didn't have huge success at LSU, but he will be successful.
How many jobs are you hearing connected to Danny Sprinkle?
Well, certainly the Washington job is like front and center. I think that's the main player right now. But he's obviously going to be popular. There's really, I've discussed this before on your show, I know, but there's just no precedent to a team completely turning over its roster and making the NCAA tournament.
The one that I like, and I like the job he's done. It kind of came out of nowhere, and he should probably cash in and get out of that program, considering what's going on with Washington State. But Kyle Smith not only did a great job coaching, but he's a digital undergrad found, which is
wow.
Which is a little off the radar there. But anybody who goes digital underground and what he did at Washington State, I don't know how sustainable that is at Washington State, given their current situation. But
digital underground,
yeah,
jeez.
Yeah, I think
early 90s?
Earlier than that, 80s.
Is it 80s?
Yeah.
Kyle Smith strikes me as one of the more interesting coaches. Might have more of a work-life balance than most people, I think.
We've been talking.
Are you big on Washington State in the tournament?
Not really. They've tremendously overachieved, and kudos to Kyle Smith for getting into the tournament. Hopefully, he can cash in on that, but I do not see them lasting long.
We've been talking about Mark Pope and his success too, Ken, and maybe if his eyes start to wander a little bit. But I was saying to Scotty, now you're going to be a player in the Big 12 conference.
Right. Yeah.
Are you a stepping stone, or are you the end-all, be-all? Because if you're going to really compete, then you better say, "Oh, Coach Pope, I saw that you took an interview or two. What's it going to take?" And you keep him at BYU, right?
I think so, yeah. So first of all, the move to the Big 12, I think, really added a level of job security for Mark Pope that might not otherwise exist. They are still in the WCC.
He's gone.
There's all sorts of jobs that would appeal to him, right? But I think that the number of jobs that would appeal to him at this point shrinks quite a bit. So, if he can ever get BYU to break through to an Elite Eight or a Final Four, obviously he'll be able to write his own check to almost any job opening that would happen at some point in the future.
Alabama is really played into the new world of analytics. Take a lot of threes, take early threes, no mid-range, threes, rim, free throws. They're a 4 seed, taking on Charleston. I think we all assume they'll move on. But what do you think of the long-term run that Alabama could put on with Nate Oates?
Well, I wouldn't assume they're going to move on, actually.
Oh, really? You think Charleston can pull off the
I think
upset?
it'll be an interesting game. Alabama's really struggled down the stretch. Their defense is a mess. And on top of that, Nate Oates has embraced the analytics, but in a way that's almost I don't know if irresponsible is too strong of a word.
Yeah.
But, he ignores the mid-range. They don't practice the mid-range. And when they get into the tournament, when they play quality teams, even the regular season, they struggle because they're forced to take some of those shots. And that's where their offense struggles. Now, when they're playing weaker teams and they're playing teams outside the top 50, they can get the shots they want. And that formula works tremendously well. And it's an explosive offense. But I do expect his team to underachieve in the tournament this year.
Where are you at on Creighton?
I'm pretty neutral on Creighton. I mean, they've had such a almost an under the radar year.
Yeah.
It's been really solid. Like you look statistically, it's been really solid. They just, never made a ton of news during the season and kind of finished almost exactly where. I mean, I think I might have had them 11th in the preseason, and they're 11th right now. I mean, they've just done almost exactly what you would expect. So they're capable of going far. I think they're in a nice section of the bracket where they could do that. So I super experienced, and like North Carolina, like a lot of guys came back just for kind of this moment to see how far they could go. So see what they can do.
Ken, I didn't want to let you go without asking you about University of Utah. Now I know that they did not make the tournament. They're geared up and ready for the NIT.
Yep.
But how far off were they with what you were seeing, the numbers, what they were producing? How far off were they, and do they need to make any type of major changes to get themselves where they need to be?
Yeah, I don't know. They were. I felt like surprisingly close to the cut line heading into the Pac-12 tournament. I mean, it seemed like the consensus was they were maybe 4 or 5 teams out, and we know like the tournaments don't really have that much influence on the selection, so there's probably not much they could do short of winning the Pac-12 tournament like Oregon did. But yeah, a couple of road wins in Pac-12 play, and I think that, it might have done it. Obviously, the way things blew up in terms of conference tournaments, maybe that wouldn't have been enough ultimately. But if they had a couple of road wins, they would have been appearing in brackets down the stretch. And so they're close in that respect. I mean, I think at this point, Utah being a perennial bubble team is probably like a decent place for their program. It's just that you see what BYU did this year, and obviously the history of Utah, the program, you want more, and ultimately like 2 or 3 more years of this, and like, yeah, there's going to be like some unhappiness among the fan base that forces changes. But Craig Smith's history is pretty solid, so I would definitely still give it some time.
And they're moving into a tough conference. I mean, they're leaving a Pac-12 that's been up and down, and they're going into, as you mentioned, what the number 11 of the 15 years?
9 of the last 11 years, yeah.
9 of the last 11.
And I'm sure they'll be number 1 again next year. So, but we saw what BYU did. Obviously, you step up a weight class in conference play, and that doesn't mean you're you can't be competitive.
Yeah,
right?
matched.
So,
right.
Yeah.
A couple of games that I need you to tell me to walk away from. And I understand. I'll admit, because I watch these games and I watch these teams up close and in person, so I might be a little biased. I do have Nevada beating Dayton. I do have New Mexico beating Clemson. Am I out in left field on those?
No, you're in center field on those, Scotty. I think those are 2 solid picks. I do like New Mexico. I mean, I think they'll be playing with a little bit of an attitude. They're favored in that game.
It's a little bit of house money too, like, no pun intended, but it's like,
right.
But it's like, hey, we got in here. Nobody expected us to be here. And so why not just sling it and have some fun?
Yeah, I agree. Plus they get to start on Friday. So, they have enough of a break from kind of the euphoria of winning the conference tournament. And yeah, I think it's a good matchup for them. I mean, New Mexico's just a really solid team at all 5 positions. So I really like them. The Nevada-Dayton game will be a really good game as well. Nevada's been, another team that's just been solid all year, and I think won the games they should win. And I wouldn't, that's not an upset either to pick them over Dayton.
Colorado State beating them in the tournament surprised a lot of people, because in talking to a lot of coaches across the conference, obviously Utah State won the regular season, but when you were talking to coaches about what team you really didn't want to see in the tournament, everybody pointed to Nevada. And that was before people knew that New Mexico was going to get hot. But they pointed at Blackshear and they looked at Nevada and go like, it wasn't no part of that team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not sure how you differentiate from teams in the Mountain West, though. That whole tournament was, you knew you were going to have to win, at least 2 games against quality competition, if not 3. So, that was just a wild event.
Any chance Nevada could be that 10-2 upset in the second round?
Oh, I think they're from
over
a talent
Arizona.
From a talent standpoint, I think I would not put that on my bracket, but I would not be surprised if that happened.
I mean, Arizona's tough. I mean, like I said, you almost have to look at that bracket like Arizona's a 1 seed, North Carolina's a 2 seed, because Arizona's been slightly better in terms of the scoring margin numbers this year. But It could happen, certainly. I mean, you're going to see something like that happen in the second round, and 1 or 2 seed is going to go down. It's hard to say who it's going to be, though.
It's one of the things I love in the West is you're probably going to get a New Mexico Baylor matchup, 11-3.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, there's a chance you get. That's what I've got is 11-3. I think that they do beat Clemson. And a chance that you get a Mount West Conference Pac-12 matchup in Nevada and Arizona. I'd love to see both those.
Right. I mean, it'd be great if one of those teams could get to the Sweet 16. It's one of the things that's really missing from the discourse of the Mountain West the past few years. They've clearly been, nipping on the heels of the bottom end of the power conference, hierarchy. And the only thing that's missing is sending, a team or two to the Sweet 16. And certainly if you can do that from a double-digit seed, that's, I think all the more impressive.
Yep. All right, one more final segment with Ken, and we'll wrap things up next. Hans and Scotty live here at JCW's, previewing the NCAA tournament, which will get underway. Well, technically gets underway tonight with the first 4, but a full swing coming up on Thursday, and you'll hear all the games on 1280 AM. In fact, during the day when we have live programming, the games will be on 1280 AM, and our live programming will be on 97.5 FM. We got you covered from top to bottom, live here at JCW's. One final hit with Ken next right here on 97.5 KSL Sports Zone. All right, wrapping up another edition of the show. It's been the bracket preview show. We do it every year. Ken Pomroy is always kind enough to hang out. I'm just glad to be a part of it, Ken, because normally I'm traveling over the last couple of years. So with Utah State playing on Friday, I'm able to hang out with you today as the Aggies will head to Indianapolis. Late game. That game will actually tip off at 9:55 Eastern time.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, which means it'll probably be about 10:15
right,
when it's all said and done. Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so let's just reset the local teams. BYU, they get their first draw against Duquesne. You like that matchup. Even though BYU fans a little cranky, they didn't get their 5 seed. You say take the 6 and take that matchup.
Absolutely, yeah. They actually had a favor done for them, so don't complain about anything there.
And then how difficult if they do get that 6-3 Illinois matchup in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois has got the 93rd ranked defense in the country, so there's going to be opportunity to score some points there if you BYU. That's just going to be a shootout. It's going to be a really fun game. Certainly a fun game from a spectator standpoint. Maybe a little more nerve-wracking if you're a BYU fan, but I'm looking forward to that match.
Yeah, just from a pure basketball entertainment standpoint, you need to be wanting a BYU Illinois matchup.
That will be the most intriguing game of the second round, no doubt.
Well, because if you do get past Illinois, then you face Iowa State, who you're familiar with.
Yeah, and they've had success against, right? So it's like, that would be
you nearly got Iowa State at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great situation for them.
And then Utah State, TCU. TCU is they look to me a little bit like that Baylor team. Not obviously not as good, but you just got a bunch of 6'7", 6'9" dudes that can just switch every position and get after you that way. And they will be up in your grill. They force turnovers. Jamie Dixon always emphasizes offensive rebounds. So Utah State's got their hands full for sure.
Yeah, that's the deal there. You're facing a team with Big 12 size and length and strength, and it's just a little bit of a step up from what the Aggies are used to. So it will be a challenge. I mean, I do think the Aggies have a chance, but it will be an uphill battle.
Is the Aggies one of your most surprising teams this year?
Certainly among teams that made the tournament, one of the most surprising. There are some teams ranked lower that had really surprising years, that had winning seasons that didn't make the tournament. But McNeese State probably on that list too, I guess, of teams that made the tournament, even though in retrospect it looks like obvious. Oh yeah, they had Will Wade. Of course, they were going to make the tournament and be a really solid team. But they've been a very, very good team, and they're going to make Gonzaga work for that first round win. But both of those teams have been surprising.
But the good news with that is we've all got that Montana State, Grambling State play-in as the 16 circled as the biggest 1/16 possible upset, which would mean a Utah State Montana State matchup in the second round. So that's
Danny Sprinkle against his former team.
Yeah,
that's the one we're all looking.
Is there a 16 you like at all?
There are no 16s I like, Scott.
Was UMBC even on your radar?
No,
2 years,
not at all.
I love it.
Oh, the 16s are never on the radar.
Because you easily could have said, you know what? I had a feeling a few years ago UMBC and Ryan Odom were going to get that done.
I knew they'd win by 20. Yeah. No, I mean, there's nothing on the radar for any of these teams. I mean, shout out to the Longwoods and Stetsons of the world for making it. But, they're in for a world of hurt here.
Yeah.
First game.
Well, Ken, man, we can't thank you enough. Appreciate you coming by.
You're the best, man. Love what you do.
Thanks, guys. I always love coming out, and hopefully we'll do this again next year.
There you go.
We just asked you for a 60 and 60 ranking of the players, and you put your palm in Scotty and I's face and said, talk to the hand.
Got to draw the line somewhere, guys.
Yeah, we tried to get you involved in football, and you're like, nope.
Not
sir. You got enough on your plate. Hans, we've been down here at JCW. So much great food. Now that we're done, you and I are going to go wreck this place.
Yeah, they're going to have a problem on their hands. This is going to be the Aria Buffet happening of 2017 right here in our own state.
Hans and I once got kicked out of the Aria Buffet because we ate too many crab legs.
It got ugly.
I think that was possible.
I think that
they have a policy against that?
Apparently so.
I know this. They're going to be sending workers back into the slaughterhouse. They're like, all right, take down another beef. Go get us some more buffalo wings. They're going to end up killing 5 buffalo just to get us the amount of wings we need.
I don't. Yeah.
Anyways, I know it's so dumb. I know.
We're gonna be live at JCW's Thursday and Friday for a watch party. So make sure to stop by. Follow us. We'll be all over the state, enjoying all the wings, all the burgers. You can as well. here at JCW's, again, Thursday and Friday for the NCAA tournaments, and you'll hear all the games right here on the Zone. Get those brackets filled out. Go to KSLSports.com, fill out your bracket, compete against all of us. Also, remember, Hans and I have the gas station food bracket going on as well.
Speaking of good
we haven't
food,
even talked to Ken about this.
Yeah, this is.
Is sushi on the list?
It's not. Gas
No.
station sushi did not make the list. No. That made the list of most intestinal discomfort. But we're talking about good old-fashioned gas station food. When Ken Pomroy steps into a gas station, what is the go-to purchase? Like, what are you headed towards?
You got a road trip. You're heading back east, see the family.
Is it the hot dog? Is it the microwave
Nachos?
burritos?
It's
Corn
the
nuts.
hot dog. I love the hot dog on the roller. It's been on the roller probably for, an hour or two. I mean, that's I think,
So you like that crisp casing?
exactly.
Attaboy.
That's a nice touch on my
Something
hot
that's
dogs.
really sweating.
Absolutely.
It's been under that heat lamp for a long time.
Right.
The sweat off that dog softens up the bun. Yeah, you got to love that.
So it's all available for you at KSLSports.com. Get there now. Big thanks to Nate and the crew for the live stream as well, putting our ugly mugs on the stream. And it's been a lot of fun, man. Fun show today. We'll be back at it tomorrow right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.